sort of watched the sermon from last week and was horrified that it went on for 28 minutes. So I apologize. I will not do that to you this morning, but I tried to do some things that are a little complicated. Sometimes it takes me a while to get it out. So we're breaking this down in stages today, but Jesus is not the Messiah that we wanted, is he? Or he's not the Messiah that the folks back then wanted, and to be honest with you, Jesus is often not the Messiah that we want today. He's not the one we ordered online. He doesn't look like the picture. It's broken out of the box, turns everything upside down, and doesn't comport or conform to the ways that we want Jesus to perform or to do things. Jesus races around Galilee for 3 years telling people, or trying to tell people, the way you've been doing it and the history and traditions that you have are all great, but you need to widen the aperture a little bit. You need to understand that you're not the only ones that belong, that just following the rules and ticking the boxes is not going to get you into heaven, and you're not going to find salvation. And you need to open yourself up and be more inclusive. And we just still don't want to hear it. We're still fighting some religious wars that were fought really for the last 2,000 years. I've been talking about how do we see, and why can't we see? Thanks, Kate. So here's Jesus coming into Jerusalem. How do we get from this on Sunday to one more? This on Friday. We have one more. From palm branches to this in about 4 days. And if we think about what our biases were then and what our biases are now, and how we see Jesus in the way that Jesus is supposed to be, well, we can start to kind of see how this evolves, can't we? So can you go back to for me, Kate? Jesus is always turning things upside down. So I know the prophet Zechariah said, "Behold, your Lord comes to you on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So Jesus very well may be trying to fulfill that prophecy. But also think about a military parade into a city after you just wiped out the enemy. Jesus is coming in as the conquering hero, as the descendant of David, right? And everyone says, our Messiah will come. He will overthrow the Roman Empire, put everyone to the sword. And by the way, those of us that are on the inside are going to get some really cool jobs. And we're going to help rule, and this kingdom's going to last forever. It's going to be terrific. Those Romans are really going to get it. And so we go roaring in with our battle tanks and the aircraft flying overhead and shooting rockets. Only Jesus comes in, and if you think about it, he's almost kind of making fun of people a little bit. Can you see the irony? His feet dragging in the sand as he rides this donkey in, the conquering hero of Israel. Peter, I was talking about last week and the last couple of weeks, when Jesus called him Satan, he just can't quite see, just doesn't get it. And the thing is that we still don't get it now, and it's 2,000 years later. I don't get it sometimes. I have my own biases. Let me go forward, Kate. So why can't we see still? We could have one more. So we're all raised with biases. You have your biases, I have mine. They happen like that. They're pre-critical. You don't have a chance to think. Most of them, we learned from our childhood. We learned from the way we were raised, our cultural and social environment. Here's just a few, and I've been guilty of one or more of them. No, I've been guilty of all of these at one point or another in my life. When somebody tells you something that doesn't quite fit with your worldview, like it or not, immediately we kind of go like this. We may not have the expression on our face, but, you know, if you like Manhattan, if you like New England clam chowder, you know, the white kind, and someone starts to tell you about how great Manhattan clam chowder, the red kind, is, and why it's better, you know, we just immediately do it. We can't help it. As ideas fit, if you're telling me something I already agree with, and my brain says, this is not going to be any work for me. It's no work. I actually get a little pleasure jolt when I agree with you because we're agreeing with each other. One more. Complexity. Our brains prefer a simple idea, even if it's a lie, to a complex truth. I'll give you an example of this. And this is kind of where I'm going here as to why we still can't see. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. Okay, we were at book study this week, and we were talking that most Christian traditions these days, you got your Episcopalians and your Presbyterian Church USA and your Methodists and a few others that ordain women, but we're kind of a minority. It's easier, really, for me to just, as Pastor Charlie or Pastor Jeff or whoever, to just open the Bible and show that to you, and have you go, oh, well, it says it right there. That's easier than having someone sit down and say, well, let me go through the fact that actually Paul didn't really write Timothy or Titus. That this is where all these rules come from, and Paul really didn't even write Timothy or Titus. It's easier for me to just show you that than to say, let's look through all of Paul's writings and show that he was actually a radical feminist for his day. That he said, women, take control of your husband's body. That this was crazy talk. But it's easier just to flop that out and to say, okay, now this is why men are in charge. Now everybody take your positions in church. We prefer these simple lies because they're easier for our brains to process and it's not as much work. And then the communities that we're raised in. If you think about the people screaming, Hosanna, welcome son of David, they have a tradition in a community. And then 4 or 5 days later, that community now has a new view of Jesus. And it's hard for us to speak out against our community. When we speak out against our community, we can be ostracized. We can be not included. We can be excluded. And when it's told to me by people who are confident that they're right, I'm reluctant to speak out as well. Peter's tradition, the people waving palm branches, their tradition said that the Messiah was going to be a conquering hero. When it turned out he wasn't a conquering hero, they had to get rid of him. And people didn't want it. And the chief priests and the elders are the ones that said, this is what we have to do. There's two places that attract narcissists, confident people. It's politicians and the clergy. Just is. Presbyterian Church USA puts us through a battery of psychological tests. We have to travel and see psychologists and psychiatrists and be tested to make sure, or to try to see that we're not complete and utter narcissists and we can actually minister to you instead of asking you to minister to us. But if you look at churches nationwide, what churches seem to be doing great? It's that one with that dynamic guy, right? Maybe he's got the beard and he plays the guitar really well. Or he preaches about hell and damnation in a way that's kind of scary but entertaining. And so it was not without a little sense of pleasure that I saw this week a few things. I've been guilty of all of these biases, by the way. A lot of women are leaving the Southern Baptist Church and other Baptist traditions, and I think it's a wonderful thing. That's my bias, though. My bias is that I don't think women should take second place in any situation. Whoever is the most qualified to do the job should do the job. And so I noted with a little bit of pleasure this going on. Also this week, or maybe last week, Beth Moore says she's finally had it. She's tired of being ignored. She's tired of being made fun of in an elevator because the heels are too high or her skirt isn't long enough. She's tired of having to only teach women. She's tired of men getting angry at her because she's a better preacher than they are. And again, I got a little jolt of pleasure because it's confirming what I already believe. This stuff just kind of goes on and on. You have one more, Katie. The shootings in Atlanta recently, where I believe 8 people were killed. Is that right? 8? 10? Okay. It's tempting for me, as I start to wrap up here, as I start to come in on this, as far as our biases and why can't we see, it's tempting for me to say, see, they've got it all wrong. This absolute obsession with sexual purity and male domination is finally unraveling, it seems to me. But then I have to look in the mirror and I have to see that, you know what, we're not perfect either. When we start to think that Jesus is on our side and Jesus belongs in our box, that's when we start to get dangerous. That's when we continue to fight the religious wars because my point of view, my bias, means that I look at an entire group of people, say in this instance, the Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist, and I start to paint everyone with the same brush. When probably 90% of the people sitting in there don't even think about this. We go to church here because Nana went here. And we've always gone here. We like the people. We've got our own problems. Presbyterian Church was horrible in Canada and the United States. We have our own sins to atone for. We're not perfect either, and we have our own biases too. I do too. My biases affect my ability to see. And giving up these biases, when I get a little jolt of pleasure, when I see Beth Moore is leaving and finally saying enough is enough, I get the jolt of pleasure in my brain and it confirms my biases. It can actually make me, I'll say a dangerous person, but it makes me a judgmental person. And guess what? God didn't say Charlie gets to judge. Thank God. And I have to give that up. I have to give that little jolt of pleasure up the way you have to give up something along the way too. Something in yourself, a bias in yourself, that Jesus is trying to tell you, you're going to have to give up the thinking that those people don't belong down the street. Their theology is wrong. Those people in that other political party don't belong because they don't agree with me on this, and this. And giving up, you wondered, what does Jesus mean by follow me? Means that you take up your own little cross and die. It's because each one of these things we give up is like a little death all along the way. And it hurts. We have to stop the cycle. I see this cycle here in Parma. We talked about it in book club, believe it or not, and I won't go into any details. But there's people that are excluded for one reason or another. And I think in a lot of ways, people sitting in churches that have had a dynamic shift in their theology, I think most people sitting in that church a lot of times are like, what the hell just happened here? We were all getting along so well. When did it happen that those people don't belong anymore? Because Betty's my friend. Sue's my friend. Bill's my friend. Clergy has to stop doing this. We have to be willing to say, you know what? I belong on the side of the road just like you do, throwing palm branches on Sunday and screaming, "Crucify him," on Friday. And we have to follow Jesus' saying that the world is full of people and everyone belongs. I know this is, if you have one of these on your car, don't tear it off or anything, but I hate these. Tolerance. How good does that make you feel? Darren, you know what? I tolerate you. I'm willing to tolerate you. You all that makes sense. Tolerance. I tolerate you, and therefore I feel so good about myself because I have tolerance. Because you're so intolerable. What's the next one? Oh, this is one of my favorites. Coexist. Jesus tells us to coexist. God says coexist. Okay, Darren, I can somehow find a way to live in the same corner of Idaho with you. I can coexist with you. No, I love Darren. This isn't it. This is not it. It's a neat first step. There ought to be a bumper sticker, and I couldn't find one online. Maybe one doesn't exist. But it ought to be curiosity. I'm curious about you and your political position on this. I'm curious about you. How is it that you think that women shouldn't be ordained and be leaders in the church? Or I'm curious about you, and I want to learn more about you. And I want you to learn about me and my tradition. But at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. We have to be. When we put God in a box, the danger is when we draw a box around and put God inside it and say, these are the rules and these are the things that God says, like 1 Timothy. And our God is in this box. And we believe that God is on our side. That's when we become dangerous. When we exclude other people because their beliefs are different. I love what Abraham Lincoln said. One of his advisors said, let us hope that God is on our side. And Lincoln said, no, let us hope that we are on God's side. Jesus just refuses to join a team. And we'll see this next Sunday as we march to the cross and in the resurrection. And in the resurrection, we have the full promise and the knowledge that all of us are blessed and beloved children of God, no matter what team we happen to be on, and that all of us face glory in the end.